28th of January marks Data Privacy Day, a day designed to raise awareness, promote privacy, and data protection best practices. Today, we're going to be discussing Encryption 101, giving you our best practice guidance to keep your users' data as safe as possible. Stay tuned to find out more. Hi, my name is Ben Glazier, Developer Evangelist here at Xero. If this is your first time here and you want to learn more about Xero's robust set of APIs, our SDKs, or the Xero App Store, then start now by subscribing and clicking the bell icon for all notifications to make sure that you don't miss a thing. Data protection is something that we take incredibly seriously at Xero, and with so many of you integrating into Xero customer data, I thought I'd take some time out to catch up with Regan Ashworth, our API Governance Senior Manager, for his encryption best practices to keep your users' data safe. Stay tuned to the end of this video where I will summarize those tips and share our top 4 steps that you can implement today. So without further ado, let's speak to Regan himself. Hi Regan, thanks so much for joining us, joining me in your evening ahead of Data Privacy Day a little bit later on this month. How are you?
I'm great, mate. It's always lovely to see your well-manicured head.
Oh, thank you, mate. I appreciate that. You'd be surprised how often I don't hear that. And look, we've spoken about encryption a few times now, and I know that to some people that term might seem a little bit scary or perhaps even daunting. So in super simple terms, which I think is largely for my benefit, can you tell us exactly what on earth encryption is and why it's so important?
Yeah, sure, mate. So I guess when we're talking about encryption, what we're really talking about is controlling access to data. You know, there's some people that we want to have access to the data. There's some people that we don't want to have access to data. So through encryption and encryption keys, we can manage that. We can control who has access and who doesn't, which is very useful. Especially software is always changing, right? The changes that we make to databases and different applications as we go through. It's constant, different people looking at it, people coming and going from companies. So it's important that we have some solid foundations that we can go back to every now and then. And look, encryption is a really nice kind of general way of doing all of these things. Provides several layers of extra security. But there's 2 really important aspects of encryption, one of them being encryption in transit. So that's when things are moving between 2 systems, and also encryption at rest, which is when data is stored, and it's stored in an encrypted state, really, is what that one's all about.
Yeah, I think I'll follow on there. I love analogies, as you know. And I think kind of one that resonates most with me is, I guess it's a bit like the valuables in your house, right? We consider that to be the customer data. And they're fairly safe if they're in your house because the front door's locked. But you and I both know there's kind of multiple access points to a house, right? Like you could come through a back door or you could come through a window. So I guess putting those valuables in a safe, that would be encryption. And therefore, if anyone did want to get hold of that super sensitive data or your valuables, they'd have to effectively break the safe. There's only one single point of entry, right?
Yeah, totally. That's a great summary.
Okay, nice. So if I'm one of the many thousands of developers working with Xero's API and Xero customer data, and understandably I want to keep them safe, where would I start with encryption?
Yeah, I think there's lots of different things to consider. Probably the first thing is do you actually need to store the data to begin with? That's the best form of encryption, is not actually storing the information. So, following those old principles of YAGNI, you ain't going to need it. If you don't think you're going to need that information in the future, don't burden yourself with the responsibility of encrypting it and storing it. But if you are going to encrypt it and store it, then making sure that you're not writing your own encryption algorithms is probably a good start. It's a good idea to use strong and proven encryption algorithms. Making sure that the keys that you generate are unique and of a reasonable length. Shouldn't be 0000 or 1234 should be something of a reasonable length that is not possible for a human being to guess within a short space of time. And then that key that is really giving somebody access to that data, make sure that you put that in a safe place. Don't upload it to your GitHub repository. Don't make it freely available to a wide range of people. Control access to it. And you know, because one of the most common ways of getting around encryption is actually getting a hold of that key. And yes, you know, those things that I've mentioned are things that people have done and will continue to do in the future. So it's really just a matter of vigilance when it comes to those sorts of things. But yeah, on the topic of vigilance as well, keeping your software up to date. You know, if you're using other tools, making sure that those tools are up to date, and making sure that, you know, any services that you're relying on from other third parties, that those are staying up to date as well. And, you know, having some sort of rigor around those processes. So having, you know, a plan to, you know, at least look at these things maybe once a year or perhaps more often, depending on how you feel about things. Yeah, taking that sort of approach. Does that all make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Makes perfect sense to me. And you spoke a little bit about encryption algorithms there, which sound complicated. And then multiple out there. Like, where should I start when I'm developing my application?
Yeah, look, there are quite a few out there. And some of them, as time has gone on, are not as secure as others. As computational power has increased and you know, different techniques have changed, there are some that are outdated now. We really recommend following the NIST, who are a part of a US government agency, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. They have a guidebook on which algorithms are okay to use and which ones aren't okay to use. Yeah, they're really the high watermark and the specialists in this area, so we follow their suggestions. But yeah, lots of other agencies that put out information like that. Really important to lean on the experts when it comes to these things, because they're looking at it constantly, and then they're making sure that these things are always appropriate. And you know, never make the assumption that you've got all the most up-to-date information, right? Always go out and find the best information that you can find about this particular subject, because it is changing constantly at the moment as things evolve.
You also spoke a little bit about keeping encryption keys secret. Don't put them on GitHub. I think that kind of goes without saying. Have you got any advice on how best to do this? How to keep those keys safe?
Yeah, if you're using AWS or Azure or Google Cloud Platform or anything like that, you're really best off using the inbuilt tools to that platform to manage those keys and keep them somewhere safe. But you know, lots of other different places where you might host your application might have something similar as well. Different source code repositories might have like a secret storage service that you could possibly use. Or some continuous integration tools have that sort of stuff as well. But in the case where neither of those things are an option, the fallback would be like an environment variable or a password protected file in a file system. But yeah, look, the other two are preferable. And you know, most of the people that are making applications nowadays will be doing it in one of those major platforms anyway, and there's lots of tools available within those tools natively. So we definitely recommend taking advantage of those.
Yeah, awesome. So if I'm working with all this potentially sensitive data, where would you recommend that I apply encryption? To everything?
Yeah, good question. There's two different types of encryption that we talk about when we're talking about storing data. So the first one is transparent encryption. And that's where your application actually isn't aware that the encryption is happening. So that might be something like database encryption or disk encryption, where let's say the database, for example, is encrypting the information that's being sent to it without the knowledge of the application that's calling the database. That's a really good baseline, you know, like at a bare minimum, you should be doing that. Shouldn't be a massive implication to doing that. There's only positives. but for the really sensitive information. And so when we're talking about things like personally identifiable information, financial information, identifying those types of things, in-application encryption is a really good idea as well. And that's where your application manually encrypts those things before they go into a database or a data store. And that encryption key is managed somewhere. And therefore, if somebody was to get access to the database, they would still not be able to access that information without that encryption key. So it's just that extra layer of protection. And we do really talk about using different layers because the more layers you have, the more difficult it is to get for a bad actor to get through all of those layers, right? And the last thing that any of us want is for sensitive customer information to make its way out into the dark web, or God forbid, a blog post somewhere where somebody's like, here's all my customers' phone numbers. None of us want that. We want to make sure that things are protected. So, identify the things that are the most critical and the ones that are going to cause the most harm if they get out there. And those are the types of things that you want to use in application encryption. But transparent encryption is really just that baseline.
Sounds good. Look, thanks, Regan. I appreciate your time as always. Some super helpful information there, which I think our developer community are absolutely going to love. So thank you very much for taking us through that. And have a good evening.
You too, mate. Always great talking to you. Have a good one.
Take care, buddy. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks again, Regan. So much useful information to digest. To make that process a little simpler for you, here are our 4 encryption steps that you can start implementing today. Step 1. Use the best of what's available. Secure algorithms and strong implementations are baked into most languages, frameworks, and hosting environments. Make use of these where you can, and don't try to build cryptography from scratch. Step 2. Keep those encryption keys secret. Access to the key provides access to the data, so make sure that access to the key is limited to only the identities that need to use it. If you have a secret storage device, then use it to secure your keys. Step 3. Use transparent encryption where you can. If there's an option to enable encryption through your platform or hosting provider, then it's a great idea to make use of it. And finally, step 4. Use application encryption for your most sensitive data. If there's information that you want to keep entirely confidential between your application and your customers, then encrypt that data in your application before storing it in the database. This is just a short overview of encryption, and there are likely many other considerations for you to make about your specific application and your specific environment. This is our take on generally the applicable best practices as a baseline, but always make sure that you check your local regulations and internal standards as well. What's been the encryption best practice that's resonated with you the most? Or do you have an encryption best practice tip of your own that you'd like to share? Let me know in the comments section below. If you've enjoyed this type of content, please hit that like button in support so I know you'd like to see more content like this in the future. Thanks so much for watching. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.